Okay, so good day everyone. So we are the group 5 and for today we are going to discuss the chapter 5 front office communication. Objectives. At the end of this chapter, the student is expected to understand what is communication, the importance of communication, the communication process, the function of communication, the basic goals of effective communication, the barriers to communication, the kinds of communication flows, how to improve communication in hotels. So what is communication? Communication may be defined as the transfer of information, including feelings and ideas, from one person to another. The goal of communication is to have the receiver understand the message as it was intended. The transfer process, however, may be affected by a number of factors that either help or hinder the effective delivery of the message. Okay, when you say communication, you'll be involved in a conversation wherein you have to imparting or exchanging of information, but not just information but also about the feelings or ideas. And when you also transfer a information, dili siya permitting kanang stable or okay. Na jud tay mga hinder ana, which is kanang katong mga barriers of communication. And also, when you say communication, dapat when a sender transfer a information, dapat ang receiver kanang masabtan kung unsa jud gipasabot sa message.
Importance of communication. Without communication, organizations cannot exist. It is through communication that individual members of the organization will know the important concern. So it means that what their organization is, what objectives the organization wants to achieve, and what the rules are in achieving the organization's objectives, and how they will achieve these objectives. Who the individual members of the organizations are.
So good day everyone, my name is Sheila Marie Salvo and I will be reporting all about the communication process. Communication is a two-way process in which a sender reaches a receiver with a message. There is a need for people in organizations like hotels and resorts to have knowledge of the communication process, and it is the first step to make it effective. There are 6 components of an effective communication. They are the following: communication source or sender, a message, a channel, a receiver, feedback, and the environment. The communication source or sender is the person who attempts to send a message which could be spoken or written in sign language or nonverbal to another person or group of persons. The degree of attention the message will be received will depend on the receiver and the perceived authority and experience of a sender. So the sender is the one who will give the message to the receiver. The next is the message. The message is the purpose of the idea that is conveyed in a communication effort. The message is the actual physical product as a result in coding. Thus, when speaking, the speech is the message. When writing, the written document is the message. When making gestures, the movements of the arms and the expression on the face are the message. So the message is either you can write it, speak with one another, or body languages. Then there are 2 components comprises the entire message. One is the thought or the conceptual component of the message, which is contained in the words, ideas, symbols, and concepts chosen to relay the message. And the second one is the feeling or emotional component of the message, which is contained in the intensity, force, demeanor, and sometimes the gesture of the communicator or sender. This second component enriches and clarifies the meaning. The message and its effect is to give the message its full. The next component is the channel. The channel is the medium through which the message travels. It consists of various types which are as follows. So the channel is mo ni siya ang unsa nga way ang paggamit nimo sa pagsend sa message nimo. So here are the examples. Yes. Face-to-face, the telephone and cell phones, email, written memos and letters, and posted notices. So posted notices are like kanang nakabutang nga stop sign or no dogs allowed. So nya na siya. Then bulletins. The communication of policies, procedures, and other official announcement properly belong to the formal channel because it is the one organized as an authoritative. The grapevine is the type of formal channel that transfers through networks of friendships and acquaintances. Grapevine have the advantage of being with the opportunity to address a problem before it develops into a full-blown concern. So the next is the receiver. In doing so, however, he may be influenced by his own personal factors like age, gender, beliefs, past experiences, and cultural influences and needs. The person receiving the message is the receiver. He should interpret and understand the message. So the receiver is the one nga naka-receive jud sa message. Mao jud to. Then the feedback. So in other words, ang feedback is kanang unsay mong reaction sa na-receive nimo nga message. Then the feedback refers to the process of communicating how one feels about something another person has done or said. When a supervisor calls his subordinates over the phone and asks, "How are you getting along with our new recruits?" The answer, which could actually be the feedback, could be, "I think we made a mistake in the recruiting these people." It is difficult to know whether the message was received and understood without a feedback mechanism. The feedback provides a clue to the sender of the information whether or not the message he sent was received as intended. The environment. The environment refers to the circumstances in which messages are transmitted and received. In an environment of trust and confidence, messages are really transmitted even if these messages are controversial. The advantage of this type of environment is that management is provided. So the noise refers to anything that disturbs the communication, including the attitude and emotion of the receiver. Noise includes loud music generated by the third party, the feeling about a sick relative, children playing in the background, static interferences in electronic transmissions, and many others.
So now, I will report basic methods of interpersonal communication. So, people in organizations transfer meaning between and among each other using any or all of the three basic methods, which consists of the following. So, the verbal, the written, and non-verbal. So verbal communication. Verbal communication is a major means of sending messages. So, the delivery of verbal communication is quick and it provides the opportunity for a quick feedback. So, this verbal communication talks about informal communication, which is direct to your receiver. So, the sender and the receiver are chit-chatting about the latest issues in showbiz. So, that is verbal communication. It talks about many things, especially in chit-chatting. So that is verbal communication. So a major disadvantage of verbal communication is the distortion of the message when it passes through several people. So major disadvantage dun siya because sometimes informations are not true and not validate because of each sender who kanang nakadawat sa message, then wala siya kaibaw sa full story of the information. So nadjay usa lang ka one little distinction sa message kay makonsist na siya o kanang distortion sa message o kanang fake or dili tinuod. So verbal communication is the appropriate method of the sender. So first is wants to appear informal. So verbal communications is an informal communication. Why? Because it talks about chit-chatting or talks with another people with informality, like talking with their daily lives, talking with their daily issues in showbiz, and talking of anything that not matters the most. So two, wants to invite suggestions and ideas which are more likely to spark of a discussion. So verbal communication sometimes kanang kuan siya like latest issues na mo spark kanang ay kana akong silingan kay nabuntis or ingana, so kanang makakuan jud sa details sa every story na maganahan ang receiver na maminaw ug maayo. So 3 is explaining something complex and people might need to ask for as he goes along. So what I have said that at every spark of discussions kay maang receiver mas ganahan maminaw about the whole story of the discussion. Number 4 has important news to impact such as retrenchment. So that is why kana kung spark off ang discussion, so na jud say kuan na new information na impact sa usa ka stories. So 5 needs to very diplomatic and feels he will be more effective face-to-face than writing. So verbal communication more of face-to-face discussions. Na 6 has something highly confidential to say and putting it in writing is risky. So verbal communication is appropriate when the sender wants to maintain formality or distance from other person or a group of people. So verbal communication is appropriate when you talk to someone informality. Next is wants a permanent record of what we have been said. So this verbal communication is effective because the permanent record or the newly discussion appeared to what the sender is said is facts. Next, needs receiver comments to be in writing for legal reasons and wants to avoid further discussion of the subject by signaling that the matter is closed. So next is one of the parts of basic method of interpersonal communication is written communication. So written communication includes memos, notice boards, and letters to the staff, emails, faxes, internal newspaper, and instant messaging. So the advantage of written communications are the following. So it is formal and authoritative. Next, it provides a permanent record of what had been said. So we can tell that it's facts because it provides a permanent record. So next is it provides a document useful for legal purposes. Next is a number of people will receive exactly the same information. And next, it is used in communicating something complicated. And next, it avoids a lengthy discussions. So, written communication is not appropriate when the receiver need to ask questions or to seek clarification. So, written communication is not appropriate because if the receivers need to ask clarification, so we can say that it's not appropriate because in written communication it talks it message with formality. So how does the receiver needs clarification if that written communication is formality? So that means that the message is informal. So it tackles about limited facts. So that's why the receiver need to seek clarification. So second is more discussion is needed before the facts are established. So one is the disadvantage of written communication is that it is needed more discussion than it has to be established. So a friendly and informal atmosphere is needed. 4. The message is very important and the message is confidential. 6. The information may be upsetting to the receiver. So next is non-verbal communication. Communication that takes place through facial expression. So in verbal communication, it uses talk speeches, while in non-verbal communication, it's using only body gestures. So communication that takes place through contact and other physical gestures, so that is why body gestures is referred to as a non-verbal communication. When linked with spoken language, body movements are more popularly referred to as body language, fuller meaning to the senders of the message. For instance, spoken goodbye without a hand wave will interpreted differently than one in a hand wave. So one should observe non-verbal cues when a person is delivering a message.
So let's move on to functions of communication. So I am your next reporter, President Ella Besares. So what are those functions of communication? So first is information function. So we all know communication happens when there are two or more people involved. So it's either you are providing the information or you are getting the information. So what is information function? So communication is a means used to encourage commitment to organizational objectives. So as I said earlier, you are providing or getting the information when you are involved in a communication. So muna ang major part or major functions of communications ang mag-get or mag-provide of communication. So the next one is motivational function. Communication is a means used to encourage commitment to organizational objectives. So one of the example of communication is it gives motivation. One is motivational or motivation function. So communication is a means to use encourage commitment to organizational objectives. So ang use pod sa or function pod sa communication is it gives encouragement to the organization So next, commonly accepted interpretations of various forms of body language. So we all know body language is one of the example of non-verbal communication. So what are those body languages? So first is facial expressions. Facial expressions. So facial expressions consist of frown, smile, raised eyebrows, narrowed eyes, or pursed lips. So one of the general interpretations of frown is displeasure or unhappiness. And one of the general interpretations of smile is friendliness, happiness. The third one for raised eyebrows is disbelief and amazement. And lastly, on narrowed eyes and pursed lips is anger. Next is next is eye contact. Eye contact consists of glancing and steady. So when we say glancing, it is a form of communication interpret as like you're giving an interest on something, while unsteady is active listening, interest, or seduction. Third one is gestures. Gesture consists of pointing fingers, folded arms side hands, uplift, outward. It is interpreted as authority, displeasure, lecturing, not open to change, relaxed, disbelief, puzzlement, and uncertainty. Lastly, for body languages is body postures. It is consist of fidgeting. So lastly, body postures. It consists of fidgeting, dawdling hands on hips. So it is interpreted as boredom. The second one is shrugging shoulders. It is interpreted as anger, defensiveness, and indifference. The third one is squared stance of shoulders. It is interpreted as problem solving, concerned, and listening. And lastly, biting lips, shifting, jingling money is interpreted as nervousness. So the third functions of sige na akong kuwan. Usa gani akong topic. Functions theory of communication. Look, wala ko na post ha. Ikat-kat lang niya. So the third functions of communication is control functions. So communication clarifies duties, authorities, and responsibilities, thereby permitting control. So when we say control functions, this is like an example if you are providing the information, if you are the sender. So syempre ikaw yung nagpuput sa information, sila kay maminaw ra. So mag clarify na og duties og authority if unsa ang imong isulti or unsa information ang imong ihatag kay control nimo, while sila ra ang mag-receive. So one of the functions sa communication kay mag-give nimo og control, especially if ikaw ang sender. So next one is emotive function. Communication permits the expression of feelings and satisfactions of social needs. So when we say emotive function, it is also called as expressive function. So one of the example for this is if mo na kag like happy birthday. If man kag happy birthday, even though verbal ka nga happy, but ang imong tone kay like cold kayo, ang interpret ana sa usa ka receiver kay you're not happy nga iyahang birthday, or while nag-greet ka niya dili ka happy ba even though verbally niya na kag happy birthday. So muna murag ang imong expressions, imong noun, ang imong tone muna ang usa sa tan-awon sa emotive function.
Hi everyone, my name is Princess Jane and I will be Hi everyone, I am Princess Jane Verano and I will be the next reporter for today's report. So let's move on to the basic goals of effective communication. So the basic goals of effective communication is not just about transferring message from one person to another. In organizations like hotels, communication must be made effective. Effective communication is really a way to achieve certain goals which consist of the following. So, basic goals of effective communication. It is not an effective communication goal. Provide clear, understandable directions that increase the confidence and productivity of the receiver. And also, one of the most common goals of communication is to inform and to give direction. So the effective communication is really a way to achieve certain goals, and it consists of 4 effective ways, such as to gain goodwill, to inquire, to inform, and to persuade. It may be expected that when communication goals are achieved, accomplishing the organizational objectives will be a matter of course.
Okay, next is the barriers to communication. When you say barriers to communication, it talks about when you transfer a message or information, there is a barrier where a certain person dili sila ka understand sa message. So these are the barriers of communication. We have filtering, selective perception, information overload, emotions, language, communication apprehension, absence of feedback, physical separation, lack of credibility of the sender. So the first one is filtering. Filtering refers to the manipulation of information that it is seen more favorably by the receiver. Subordinates filter information to avoid displeasing their superiors, such as not reporting the correct number of employee turnover. Sometimes, filtering is used to promote one's interest in the organization. When filtering gani is purposely gimanipulate ninyo ang information inyo siya ikuan ba, i-mind ninyo ang reaction sa receiver, which is, for example, subordinates filter information to avoid displeasing their superiors, such as not reporting the correct number of employee turnover. When you say employee turnover, mo na siya ang number of employees like voluntarily nga ni hawa or ni na fired or na laid off. Sometimes dili na nila ilay manipulate, dili siya correct number of employee turnover ang ilang ibutang para dili kayo malagot ang ilahang superior unsa man ana siya. So next is selective perception. Selective perception, receivers most often selectively see and hear messages based on their needs, motivation, experience, background, and other personal characteristic. You say selective perception manggod is kanang pilion ra nila kung silang paminawon o ilahang tan-awon. Okay, so for instance, a person who has limited exposure to recruitment will find it difficult to actively listen to a lecture on current hiring practices. So ang kaning person na siya limited exposure sa recruitment, which is na siya experience sa mga past nga mga kanang experience about recruitment. Then maglisod na siya og paminaw about aning current hiring practices. So that's why ningon ko nga pilion na niya si paminawon or unsa yang ganahan paminawon. Okay, so mo maglisod siya og paminaw ana, which is dili siya anad nga mo follow aning bag-o nga hiring practices from what I understand. Okay, next is information overload. Information overload refers to the condition in which information inflow exceeds an individual's processing capacity. So ang kani siya because of too much information manggod, na tendency nga ang kaning naka-receive ani is maglisod siya og cope up o maglisod siya og handle. So na tendency nga iyang makalimtan or dili niya ma-process dayon. Okay, so next, language. So words do not always mean the same thing to different people. The best thing to do when delivering a message is that the sender must use words which are commonly used by the receiver. So this is true from what I experienced, no? Nag-OJT man ko ato pag-class sa Tambuli. Nakaana jud ko nga barriers yun ang language. Especially, for example, ako Filipino man ko. And then, I know how to speak English. And then, akong kastorya is Korean. So, mostly Koreans, dili gud sila ingon ka mao jud mo English. So, magpaka-paka pa na yung English diha, grammatically correct pa ka diha, or kanang sentence gud ka mo, kuan gud mo deliver og kanang information or message kay dili ka nila masabtan. So kanang dapat mangita kag way kanang or words nga magkasinabot mong duha. Bisan lang gud one word lang ingon lang ka nga kanang pay, cash, kanang may nga word ba. One word ra but dako na ka siyang tabang sa imuhang kanang gitagaan sa message nga magkasinabot jud mo na. Okay, so next, communication apprehension. Communication apprehension refers to the undue tension and anxiety about oral or written communication, or both. To compensate, they try to find other means to communicate, which oftentimes are less effective and more time-consuming. So sa ariga part, mingkog communication apprehension manggod is kanang nagusay tension or anxiety nga ma-feel when it comes like face-to-face communication or kanang mga written communication or kaning duha na siya ingani nga mga tension or anxiety. So kasagaran ani nila is mangita ni sila kanang way, lain nga way parang kig-communicate, which is more time consuming na kaayo. So kanang mong one of the kuan gid siya barriers kay mas indot man jud ang face to face tanong kay makita gyud mo yung expression unsay mga pasabot niya kay sometimes magud when it comes to text maka na yung mga word nga kanang ma-misinterpret na to. So that's why. So next, absence of feedback. So feedback is an essential component of effective communication. May absence of feedback gani is kanang wala siya kanang tubag o wala siya reaction sa imuhang message. So for example, ating nun ang FO, ay ating nun ang guest, nagpa-reserve, ato siya niya siya, magpa-reserve siya sa kaning-kaning nga restaurant at 7 p.m. then table for 2 under ing ani, then indoor what if niya na siya karon gipasa FO ang message to the kanang restaurant. Sometimes magunay kanang guest nga diretso sa restaurant pero naapay uban nga paagi pa sa FO niya sila nali mo relay sa message. But kani manggong ang FO ang mo relay sa message, dapat naagi feedback ang taga-restaurant. Kay what if no, mo to si guest, then mo na, dili di available among indoor sir, kay fully booked di ay. So dapat, which is magka-problema jud, mairita jud ang guest, anak kay nagpa-reserve siya ahead of time niya, ingani ano siya pagstorya. So dapat, in a restaurant ng FO, dapat nag-feedback, no, nga mo na nga, dili available, kay kanang fully book ang indoor, or ingana, or masag niingon lag kanang, basta any feedback nga magka-communicate mong duha. And then si FO na ang bahala para makikommunicate sa guest, either iya bang mangita baglaing restaurant or mo sugot bag outdoor, so ilahan ang sabutan kung unsa na. So that's why it is kanang very difficult if we don't have feedback. Next is physical separation. Physical separation refers to interference to effective communication occurring in the environment where the communication is undertaken. These are actually physical barriers, which include the following. First, distance between people, walls, an office that is not conducive to communication, an intimidating person posted near the door, and wrong timing. Mingon gani ka og kanang physical separation, literal nga barrier gud siya. Like kanang may nagstorya mo, yan ay nag-ali ka ng mga tao. So, barrier gud siya, maglisod yung magstorya. It's because nay nag-ali. Especially walls, if face-to-face, unsang pagstorya na may wall. So, mostly lang gamito na is true call. Kanang mga, magkuha na dyan mo true call or text, mo na gamito ninyo. And, next, ako na lang sa isod ang kuha na rin emotion. Kaya ang emotion, part siya sa one of the barriers in communication, but wala siya sa PPT, it's because wala siya sa book. So, ako lang siya explain. Ako lang siya i-connect aning physical separation. So, mingon kay kag intimidating person posted near your door or wrong timing. May ang intimidating person, lisod ba dyan makigstorya sa tao nga kanang intimidated kay kano. So, maglisod ka o communicate niya. May kag wrong timing gani at ako connect sa emotion. What if emotion is kanang kanang imong emotion is maka-affect sa inyong communication. For example, namatian ka o relatives o unsa ba na. And then naay kanang nagisugo ang imong atong supervisor ba na yung manager mo. And then ikaw pasen ka na kung lupad kay imong hunahuna nga wala ka ga-focus sa imong trabaho. It's because naaka sa imong hunahuna na dito sa imong namatay nga relatives o unsa ba diha. So dili ka ka-assess sa gisugo. It's because wala mo nagkasinabot sa inyong supervisor or manager. So mong kuan pod siya o sa barriers. So next is lack of credibility of the sender. Depending on the credibility of the sender, messages can get through the channel to the receiver. If the sender has low credibility, the message even if it gets through will likely be ignored. And this is correct. Tinuod yun ni siya. Kay nga if ever kanang na low credibility kay ko, so meaning mo share kog ideas or opinions about anak, most likely dili ka lang paminawon kay para nila kanang dili siya gamit or kuan siya kanang way kwenta imong ipang storya because you have low credibility. Unlike sa kanang nadyo mga credibility paminawon gyud nila ilaha yung kanang gamiton ang mga ideas or opinions, mas mag-focus la tong tao nga na credibility kaysa sa tao nga low credibility, and that's a fact. And then next, reporter for kinds of communication flow.
So thank you. So let's move on to the next topic, which is kinds of communication flow. The flow of communication in organization takes different directions consisting of the following, which is the downward, upward, and horizontal. The downward communication. Downward communication refers to message flows from higher levels to lower levels. Their purposes are to give instructions, to provide information about policies and procedures. The various techniques used in downward communications are letters, meetings, telephones or cell phones, manuals, handbooks, and newsletters. So, other example of downward communication is superior to subordinates. This is used for assigning goals or providing job instructors. So the next one is the upward communication. Upward communication refers to messages from persons in lower level positions to person is in higher position. Its purposes are to provide feedback to higher ups, to inform higher ups of progress towards goals, and to relay current problems. So another example of upward communication is student to teacher, which is ang student na siya i-relay sa teacher, then the teacher will get that feedback and then do what the student said. Then another examples of upward communication is company meetings are an example also because they encourage upper management and lower level employees to interact with one another in person, of course. Then workers report to a supervisor or when the team leaders report to a department manager. Mag-una siya sa lower level, then up siya sa katong mga tag-as nga person sa company. Then the next communication napaday. So the techniques used in upward communication are performance reports, suggestion systems, informal drive sessions, open door policy, and exit interviews. Then the horizontal communication. Horizontal communication is to coordinate activities between departments, to persuade others at the same level of organization, and also to pass on information about activities or feelings. So aside from the downward communication, upward communication, horizontal communication talks about balance of the employees in a particular meeting. So for example, ano niya is the between employees, departments, and units within the same level of an organization. It's also the advantage of horizontal communication is to practice sharing information towards the other level, even if it's higher level or the lower level, which is the downward and the upward communication. Then, the techniques appropriate for horizontal communications are memos, telephones or cell phones, picnics, and also dinners and other social affairs.
So next, improving communication in hotels. The message should be improved so it could be easily understood. So this applies if you are the sender of a communication. If ikaw ang mag-give of information sa usa ka communication. So as a sender, imo adyon buhaton nga by giving the information or by communicating to them and giving them information, dapat ang imong ways kay easily understood or imong i-improve ba nga i-generalize nimo nga sa ways nimo sa pag-communicate kay ma-easily understand ra sa imuhang receiver. Mo na imong dapat i-improve. Especially if naa ka or nag-work ka sa hotels, of course, improving communication in hotels man. So, as an example for that is like from earlier, ang example kay when you are working in a hotel, di ba, lahi-lahi man jud nag-raise ang imuhang makaatubang, lahi-lahi og language, lahi-lahi og forms of communication nga ilang gigamit. Especially Koreans, they use sign language usually or using their phone for communicating to you. So you should improve in that part nga if ang usa ka customer kay mag-use og like gestures or like other body language kay lagi not all Koreans can speak English, di ba? So, if naa ka sa hotels nga daghan og Koreans or other race, dapat i-improve nimo ang imong verbal og non-verbal communication. Kay ara raman mo maka-communicate. So, yes. The second one is the receiver must improve his skills in understanding the message he receives. So, from the word receiver, sa asa ka communication, ikaw ang receiver. So, ako pod, sa hotel, if naay information nga ihatag sa ako ang usa ka customer, I should broaden my understanding sa kana nga message nga yang ihatag. So, di ba, mentioned earlier nga ni anak ko nga they have other communication styles nga ilang gamiton. So, I should, as a receiver, understand that kung unsa ang ilahang i-pertain ba. Kay laylahi baya ang, as I said earlier pod nga, laylahi baya og race og language ang usa ka customer sa usa ka hotel. So, that's all. So, let's move on to summary. So, these are the summary of the discussion of our discussion, the summary. So, this consists of like the topics that are being discussed from me and the other reporters. So, effective communication, it consists 6 parts: the sender, message, the channel, the receiver, feedback, and the environment. The second topic is communications that has four major communications. These are information, motivation, control, and emotive function. So, and the lastly is communication barriers that includes filtering, selective perception, information overload, emotion, language, and communication apprehension. Absence of feedback, physical separation, and lack of credibility of the sender. And that is all for our topic. Thank you for listening. So the reporters are Rhea Tahanlangit, Sheila Marie Salvo, Charlene Tampos, me, yours truly, Freset Lavisores, and lastly, our Princess Verano. Wala ang among sunshine, kinasaag siya.